If you want to know how to get started with fly fishing, then check out this video. If you're new to our channel, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons to get updates when we upload new content. Also, don't forget to visit us at fishingreminder.com. We predict the best fishing times, so if you want to catch more fish, check out those times. Fishingreminder.com is worldwide. It's for free, and if you create an account there, we'll send you email reminders about good fishing times for your particular location. So check it out after the video. It works really good, guys, and it will help you to catch more fish. All right, let's get started with fly fishing for beginners. A couple of years ago, I wanted to get into fly fishing, and I found it really difficult to get my head around all the new concepts that you have to learn when you want to learn fly fishing. I want to show you a couple of tips and tricks, what I learned so far over those years. I hope you enjoy this video. Let's get started and look at some of the gear you need to start your journey. All right, guys, so let's have a look at some gear you need for fly fishing. Obviously, you got to start with a rod. So have a look at my rod, and I'll show you what the difference is to a standard rod. And this one here is a 4-piece rod. Fits easily in this sort of carry package. And as you can see, it is pretty long. This is a 9-foot rod in length. And the thing you need to know about fly fishing rods is that they come in weight classes. So it starts at a very low number, so they're kind of numbered from 1 to, I think it goes up to 12 or something like that, with a 1 being a very lightweight rod, meaning you can only cast very light, thin lines with it and catch only very small fish with it at the same time. Very good for really small little streams or so where you need to do short casts. Then as the weight of the rod goes up, the bigger fish you can catch, the longer you can cast with a rod. But if you go up on a really high line weight and a heavy rod, which allows you to cast very long, you lose some of your accuracy with your cast. So you want to start out with a medium rod, and most often it's recommended that you start with a rod of the weight class 5. That's a good mid-range rod, and it allows you to cast far enough but also have a good precision in your cast. So guys, my rod is actually a number 8 rod. So that's a pretty heavy rod, and I chose this rod because here in New Zealand we get really big trout. I wanted to be able to land those big trout, and also I wanted to use this rod for a bit of saltwater fly fishing. The same goes for the fly line and the reel. The line weight and the reel sort of goes with this rod. As you can see on this reel, it says 7/8. So it will work with a 7 and 8 rod. It's a pretty heavy weighted line, so you can cast longer in windier conditions with that one. Yeah, so that needs to be all matched. You can't have a 3-weight rod and add a 7 line, you know, that your rod won't be able to handle that. So if you have your reel attached to your fly rod, it's sitting right in the back below your grip. That is so that you can pull out line more easily. Another thing to consider with those fly rods is the action. They have different actions, so like a slow action, a medium action, and a fast action. With a fast action, you will be able to cast further, but you will also lose precision. So most often for a beginner fly fisher, the best action rating for a rod would be a medium action rod. Let's have a quick look at the fly fishing reel. So fly fishing reel is pretty much just a winch to hold your fly line. Pretty good if you have a fly reel that also has a drag setting on it. My very first reel, it had like a very light drag that you couldn't change, and I struggled with that a lot. With this one here, I can change my drag just like on a standard reel, and that works much better when you're fighting a fish. Most of the reels have a little clip on them, and you can easily take them apart like so. If you need to clean them out, or if you need to just unwind some line and you can't get to it easily. This reel is really simple, you know, you can dunk that in water and nothing really happens. Okay, so get some line out. What I wanted to show you is when you get this line out of your reel, it has only a certain length of fly line, 100 feet or 30 meters of fly line. And then the rest of it is just backing material. This is just braided line here. If you're fighting a strong fish, the fish pulls more line than your fly line, then it will just go on your braided line here and you have more line on your reel to play the fish with. When you reel in the line, and you have to do the line lay by hand. So you run it through your fingers to make sure that the line is not all on one side of the reel, but lays out evenly. So that's pretty much all there is to a fly rod and a fly reel. You'll notice that the end of the fly line has a loop on it, and this loop is to attach your leader to more easily. Okay, let's have a look at the leaders and what that is all about. When you look at the fly fishing section and what sort of stuff you find there, you'll see that they sell tapered leaders. So tapered leader is a leader that starts thicker on one side and then runs thinner and thinner and thinner until it gets to the end. So one reason for those leaders being tapered, going from thick to thin, is that when you cast them, that the line goes straight into the water. You can buy them in different strengths. So this is a 2X leader, and that equals to 10.4 pounds. So it's pretty heavy for bigger fish. If you get like a 4X, then you get a 6 pound only breaking strain. But I recommend, if you start fishing, to start with a little bit heavier line material. You will lose a lot less flies and also fish in the end. It really sucks if you lose a lot of gear when you start fly fishing, because your flies get stuck in trees, or you whip them when you cast them and they just fly off and you can't find them anymore. Or you finally manage to hook into a nice fish and the fish just takes off because your line is too thin and your knots don't hold so well. So I recommend to fish with a little bit heavier line. Oh, and he's off. Woolly bugger is gone. And then you might have seen in the fishing shops, the next thing is a tippet. So why do you need a tippet now after you got your leader on there? So tippet basically goes to the end of the leader. The tippet is basically an extension of this leader. Those tapered leaders are quite expensive. And if you would tie your fly directly onto this leader and you change your fly or something breaks off, it gets shorter and shorter and shorter. And you have to replace this tapered leader fairly quickly. So for that reason, you get some tippet material, which is just, normal leader line really. You can get that in fluorocarbon or just in mono. You take a length, maybe 2-3 feet of that, and you tie it to the end of your tapered leader. And then on the other end goes the fly. And usually you would use a surgeon's knot, attach those two lines to each other, the tippet and the leader. But what I found recently, what works much better, are those little tippet rings. They're just little metal rings. You can tie your tapered leader directly onto that little ring. It's like tiny, you can hardly see it. You just leave this ring there indefinitely, and then you can just tie your tippet onto the other end of the ring. And when your tippet gets too short, you just clip that off and tie a new tippet on, and you will never lose any of your tapered leaders. Tippet shouldn't be thicker than the leader itself. So if you have a 10-pound tapered leader, then you can attach either a 10-pound tippet or even better an 8-pound tippet. That's the basic setup of a fly fishing rig. Pretty simple, really. Okay, let's have a look at a few flies. As you can see, I collected a bunch of flies already. And there are basically 3 different categories of flies. The first categories are streamers, second category are dry flies, and the third category are nymphs. So you got to know a little bit about those different categories of flies to be a successful fly fisherman. So let's have a look at each category and how you use those flies. So the first category of flies, streamers, are my personal favorite category because they are supposed to imitate bait fish or big kind of critters, and they're really easy to fish because all you need to do is tie one single streamer to the end of your fly leader and off you go fishing. almost as if you were fishing with a lure, with a spin rod. So streamers are very easy to fish with, and for a beginner I would recommend to start with streamers. Jeez, that was good. I got one on the good old streamer here right away. Probably the most famous streamers are called woolly buggers, and you get them in different colors. Now the problem with those bigger streamers is that they're also very bushy and they have a lot of wind resistance when you cast them. So for a beginner I would recommend to go with smaller streamers first, and you save yourself the hassle of having difficulties with your cast. So try some small streamers initially and cast them to some cruising trout. That's my preference and my advice for a beginner. So the next category are dry flies. Most people who get into fly fishing probably think first about dry flies. Let's have a look what a dry fly is. Dry flies are basically flies that have either hatched or are about to hatch and fly off from the surface of lake or river, or bigger insects that have fallen from trees, like for example cicadas. The wind's blown them off the trees, they've fallen into the water and they can't get out anymore. They're kind of on the water surface trying to struggle out. So often you see those insects floating around. When you're out at lakes in the evening, mornings, when there are insect hatches, you often see trout rising and you see the splashes on top of the water. If you're there at the right time and you see this happening, then you got to fish with dry flies. So fishing with dry flies can also be quite easy. Similar to streamers, you can just use one dry fly, cast that out, let it sit in the water and let it float around there and hope for trout to pick it up. The most famous dry flies to use are probably mayfly patterns. Mayfly exist all over the world and are a really important food source for trout. If you don't know which dry fly to start with, I would recommend go with a mayfly pattern, and then also get yourself a cicada if there are cicada in the area where you fish and it's the right time for cicadas. Now let's have a look at nymph fishing. So that is probably the most complicated way to catch trout, but also the most effective way. Nymphs are basically aquatic insects in their first stages of development. So they are like a small, slim version of the final insect. In a river, when the current is running, they get kind of dislodged from wherever they live. And trout, they normally rest behind some rocks in the current, where the current is not too strong, and look around and wait for those nymphs to drift past them. And that's basically what you want to achieve when you fish with nymphs. You want to cast a nymph in front of where you suspect the trout might be sitting or where you might have seen a trout. And then you want to have that nymph drift naturally past that trout. So the trout thinks it's one of those insects and will shoot out and pick it up. I tried to drop a nymph rig and it really works. Nymphs have to be fished on the bottom as opposed to streamers and dry flies, and you have to know how deep the water is and what weight you need. Some nymphs come weighted, some come unweighted, so you often have to use a split shot, and most people they also fish with 2 or 3, even 3 nymphs on 1 leader. When you do nymph fishing, you also usually need an indicator, so that you can see if a trout picks up a nymph on the bottom of the river, that your indicator stops or gets dragged down, and when you have to set the hook. So it's kind of difficult, and for a beginner it's very difficult when you're still trying to concentrate on your casting skills and trying to find those trout and all this kind of thing. So I think for absolute beginner, nymph fishing should be the last stage of what you learn and what you fish with. Okay, one more thing that I forgot to mention a little bit earlier is that there are also 2 different types of fly lines. There's a floating line and there's a sinking line. So depending where you fish, you might want to consider which kind of line to use. Now for a beginner, I would say a floating fly line is the most versatile. So if you have a floating line on your reel, you can just buy a sinking extension. They come in a few meters, I think, and you can tie that sinking line extension to the end of your floating line, so you get the best of both worlds. So, and that's also a cheaper way, and you don't have to have 2 reels or re-spool your reels with those different line types depending on your situation. No fly fishing for beginners tutorial would be complete without looking at some casting techniques. The thing you gotta remember is that you're not casting the lure, but that you're actually casting the line. This is the main thing to wrap your head around when you get into fly fishing. Instead of focusing your mind at the lure, you focus it at the line. That makes a big difference when you learn casting. So by all means, I'm no expert fly caster. And in order to fish, you don't really have to be super good at it. You just have to be able to present your fly to the fish. One common misconception is for a beginner that you might think you need to cast very far, as if you were fishing with a lure to cover a lot of water. But with fly fishing, that is not really the case. With fly fishing, it's more important to sneak up on fish. You don't really have to cast super duper far unless you fish in big rivers where you need to cast some distance to get to where the fish are. But in most cases, it is most important to get a precise cast and to sneak up on those fish. So I'll just tie on a small streamer to the end of my tippet. I prefer to use a uni knot. I find them stronger and easier to use than most other knots, and they don't slip. So one tool that comes in really handy when you do fly fishing is a line clipper like this one here. All right, there we go. Clip off the tack end. So the first thing you gotta do after you tie on your fly, you gotta get out a bit of line so you have some line to cast with. So I'll just pull out enough line so I can actually cast. So the first cast is just a simple roll cast. So you just put the rod a little bit behind you and you just give it a bit of a swing. You just try to focus on the line and give that a cast forward. Bring the rod back a little bit behind you so that the line forms a bit of a D shape. And all you do is concentrate on the line. Hold the line tight here with your hand or with your finger and just cast it forward so it rolls over the rod. So bring the rod back towards you, a little bit behind you, and just cast forward like this. It doesn't give you a super long cast, but if you have vegetation behind you, overhanging trees or anything like this, you can't really swing back and forth. And in that case, a roll cast is all you need. Now let's have a look at the second cast, just a standard fly cast. Always a good idea to wear glasses to protect your eyes when you do fly fishing. So you can do a roll cast first, get this line out, pull the line backwards, make sure you have some tension on it, and cast forward again. Pull backwards, let it stretch out. I'm letting a little bit more line out now. I'm pulling the line in, so I've got about the length of a rod out there on fly line. Go backwards, go forwards, and let go of my line. So I'm shooting the line out basically. And I let the rest of the line run through my hand so I get more distance. So that way I can actually get a quite long cast, but it takes a little bit of practice, so don't expect to do that the right way straight away. The goal here is that your line lays out straight in the water when you shoot it out. And often as a beginner, your line will be all over the place and it will get stuck if there's something behind you. Don't have too much line out on your back cast. It's better to focus on that line shooting forward. So when you do your back cast, pull in some line first, go behind you, and then shoot it out. And while you shoot it out, you let more line go with it. And that way you can get a little bit of distance in your casts as well. So I hope this helped a little bit. There are also much more advanced casting techniques where you load up your rod and pull line at the same time and things. But the purpose of this video is a beginner's tutorial, and I just wanted to show you two simple casts, the roll cast and the simple overhead cast, to get you started. And in most cases, that's actually all you need for fly fishing. Now, one thing you probably want to get is a pair of waders. So as you can see, I'm just using a cheap pair of PVC waders, and they're enough in most cases, especially if you're a beginner and you get started with fly fishing. Those breathable waders with extra boots and all this kind of stuff, they come in really handy if you're in the backcountry and you spend all day fishing, wading up and down rivers and stuff like that. But for a beginner, I think a pair like this is just all you need, really. One important thing to remember is that you don't have too much line out in front of you before you start any of your casts. So I hope you enjoyed my beginner's video for fly fishing and you got a little bit out of it. Starting with fly fishing can be quite difficult. Fly fishing is a really exciting way to catch fish. It's a real cool journey. You kind of never stop learning. Yeah, give us a thumbs up if you got something out of it, and hit the subscribe button and visit us at fishingreminder.com. If you want to catch more fish, you got to know when the fish will be active, and that's what we're all about at fishingreminder.com. Cheers guys, and see you in the next video.